Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Bianca. I'm the Communications and Events Coordinator here at the Trout Gallery. We're so excited that you guys could join us for the celebration tonight and the opening of the Senior Studio show this semester. With that, I will go ahead and pass things over to Rachel.
Hello, I'm just going to start sharing my screen here. Actually, I'm sorry. I take that back. I'm not going to share the screen yet, but I'm going to share some notes. So thank you all for coming to celebrate with us. My name is Rachel Lang. I am an assistant professor of art in the Department of Art and Art History. Professor Servino led the seminar last fall and I this spring. And tonight I will start us off with a brief introduction, and then our seniors will speak more about their exhibition. So early mornings and late nights, Devin, Grayson, Ernest, Rodan, Clara, and Jeremy would jump onto a Zoom call to share their artwork with each other. Peer critique is an important aspect of our program in studio art, as it allows each student to gain a greater understanding of their work from others. Throughout the year, a sense of trust and investment was formed in each other across states and continents, creating a supportive environment open to risk and play. In every process of creating art, there are remnants, analog or digital, physical or mental. It could be a lingering comment, a work started but not finished, something that remains in an in-between state. Artists might feel self-conscious or unsure about sharing these parts of themselves, as it would ask them to be vulnerable. These 6 seniors have all found ways to sit with and nurture moments of vulnerability in their studio practices, their questions, their memories, and their dreams. I want to extend thanks to the members of the Art and Art History Department and all of the staff of the Trout Gallery, our postbac Carissa, and our designer of the seniors exhibition materials, Neil Mills. And I want to thank you seniors for your patience and thoughtfulness in this challenging year. I also want to thank Tamar Weiss and her late husband, Emil Weiss, for their generosity and support for the arts at Dickinson through the Emil R. and Tamar Weiss Prize in Creative Arts, which was established in 1986 and is awarded annually to students majoring in English with a creative writing emphasis, theater and dance, art and art history, or music. Devin Anderson, a recipient of a Weiss Prize this year, will start us off by speaking about her combined thesis and Weiss Prize project.
Hi, everyone. I just want to start by saying thank you so incredibly much for coming. This means the world to all of us, even if it's like on Zoom, it's still such an immense and crazy experience. So tonight I will be discussing the installation that I've been working on for the past 8 months, which is insane. This body of work is called Untitled Number 63 Complete, but the name changes constantly, so that's always fun. This installation contains mixed media sculptures, which feature several different materials, such as clay, cardboard, paint, fabric, and polyfill. I truly hope that the combination of all of these materials overwhelms you. I use lighter materials such as cardboard and translucent fabric to convey a more whimsical aura and contradict this notion. And in order to contradict that notion, I use heavy materials such as thick fabric and clay. So the objects can attain a sense of gravity, so to speak. They become personified in their own individual way. The kitchen portrays the struggles of living, whether that includes depression, relationships, or exploitation, coupled with coping mechanisms intended to mediate these stressors. As I have gone about living my life, especially within the past year, I felt overwhelmed by the amount of stress initiated by mundane activities. I've realized that I am not alone in that experience, and this world has begun to feel so chaotic and unsettling. I use this idea of discomfort to inspire my artwork. Most of the works I create force me to find a deeper understanding in my own emotions, and I hope that they will initiate a line of questioning for the viewer as they have for me. However, rather than depicting the actions that are stressful, I try to convey these feelings through images that are uncomfortable or literal, such as oozing pus, regurgitation, and displaced organs. So obviously, as you can see, coming out of the oven, on top of the stove, and the sink as well. Hopefully, the overwhelming sensation will create an individualistic experience. Throughout this process, I was constantly struggling with the balance of nostalgia and comfort against disgust and this out of place feeling. I could never quite tell whether or not I wanted my viewers to live within the space or to run away out of fear. I personally lived in my space. I would actually eat lunch under the sink. I wrote emails from inside the fridge, and I pondered for hours upon hours as to what I would hate, absolutely hate to see. And then I interlaced those elements in everything I could possibly think of. I decided that it was necessary to have this kind of tug and pull element. I wanted my viewers to want to run away, but not be able to. The presence of objects that are meant to be concealed represents this explicit vulnerability, such as the organs. I want to force coping mechanisms to initiate within the viewer, and I want everyone, when viewing this, to take a moment and reflect upon their own levels of comfortability and why they have those levels present. Everyone has their own ways of coping with vulnerability, and I'm trying my best to capture the understanding of these diverse experiences. Beginning to understand that about oneself can be super intense and super powerful. And so I want this line of questioning, like I say over and over again, around social normalities, as well as providing a sense of captivity. If you take a close look inside the freezer, I've placed a TV in the space, which features one of my performance pieces. This piece is a little more something personal to me, as it discusses my personal coping mechanisms and the internal struggles I have with that. I've constantly struggled with finding solace in pain and disgust. And this is my time to show that explicit vulnerability. And if people feel moved, they can connect with it as well. I've had several different inspirations for this work, but the two main artists that have most heavily influenced my process were probably Klaus Oldenburg and Miyoshi Baroche. Oldenburg specifically influenced me through his way of sculpting food, and the magnifying presence it can have while still being terrifying, while Baroche influenced my sculptural technique for constructing organs and making a commentary on the inside being shown outside while using humor and irony. Both artists do a brilliant job with personifying the weight that an object can hold through textiles and other sculptural materials. And I also want to take this time to thank Mrs. Weiss from the bottom of my absolute heart for the generosity you have shown. I simply would not have been able to complete this project without you. And I've learned so much about myself and the world, and I can really only hope that my viewers can take away somewhat of the same sensation. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I'm still kind of in awe that I was able to create an installation at this magnitude and size during my undergraduate career. So it's really fantastic for you all to see this. It means the world.
All right. Thank you, Devin. So hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Yu, and I was focusing on the digital painting/drawings, and I done most of my works on the iPad. So in my works, I explore the complexity of the power dynamics between people who want to build their self-identity based on other people's criticism, like this one called Mask. It shows the dilemma that how we appreciate the love from other people and how we have also been imprisoned by those love. And this work speaks to subjects of body image, social standards of beauty, and relationships. Next slide, please. And I've been focused on digital paintings with specific body parts of people. I think it is hard to relate them with the individual who really has identity, emotion, and their own thoughts, like their posture, their clothing, their interactions represent the vulnerabilities of humans who grapple with judgments from both strangers and the familiar. Next, please. So this one's name is Born to Love. It is inspired by the hand gesture of the Buddha, and also it referencing the Asian folk tale of lovers. Next, please. And this one's called In My Closet. I think some body parts and nudity, they are unnecessarily sexually related. So they represent the self-consciousness of our own bodies, and which the society requires people to think them, especially women, to be private, to be ashamed of, to be dirty. And those thoughts will absolutely affect our views of ourselves, of other women, and of the power structure of the society. Next, please. And this one's called What Lovers Do. And it represents my idea that the issue of people's need to be noticed and to be need has become more serious in today's society because of the increased use of social medias, and how the social medias quantify how much attention you have received, and how it stimulates the competition for attention among people. Also, I try to make things more abstract. Next, please. And it is because like I mentioned above, the symbol lines of body parts can show how objectified they are and how hard to relate them with an individual who really has identity, emotion, and thoughts. I think people lose themselves when they are trying to please other people. And like in this one, implants represent how we let people's criticism and judgments manipulate ourselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ernest Hintier. So I chose to create a series of work titled Prizes. I wanted to touch on and speak on the countless experiences that people of the African diaspora, people of African diaspora are presented with in predominantly white or Western societies. To get around the COVID restrictions, I decided to use myself as a subject matter. This allowed me to be comfortable, not just in front of the camera, but also experiment with different processes. And I created both in the studio room and outdoors when the weather permitted me to do so. During the first half of the semester, and also a little bit of the last semester, I investigated topics that society present to Black people such as grief, themes of patriotism, fetishism, and also tokenism. And towards the second half of the semester, I dived more into slightly different topics. So the first image, you can go to the slide. So the first image was touching on the topic, investigating the topic of trauma or trauma porn, where media share more graphics, usually of police brutality or police violence, solely for the purpose of shock value and disregard how Black people would feel or react to that such image and footages like that. Black people are not given the time to heal due to this overexposure of trauma. Hence, in this image, I wanted to emulate that feeling that feeling that Black people feel when exposed to things like that. They feel, and ultimately they feel entrapped and intentionally used. And I intentionally used the shadows of the bars to represent them as to represent the sense of imprisonment, and the light also to feel more of them being under siege or under attack, and ultimately they feel like they're being in distress. And the second image that I chose to investigate was more touching on the idea of professionalism in society. There are more higher consequences for Black people to make mistakes and grow from that compared to other groups of people. And in this image, the first image was the warm tones. I wanted to talk about that. This image reminds me of Andres Serrano's His Cries, and I showed the person's hands spread out and in motion, and it feels like they're evaporating, almost like they're on fire. The warm images, the warm colors in this piece feels like a crucifixion or a sacrifice taking place. And that's where the title also came from, Find Myself, where you're seeing the person trying to find themselves, but in the process of that, they get crucified for that. And then the next image, which is the black and white, was touching on the idea of resiliency, despite being posed with many obstacles that be presented to them. And the resiliency process is not always perfect, but it is something worth pursuing. And then the next series of images that I created more touching on the idea of Black queer identities. Some of my influences have been Makai Carter, who explores youth identities, and Clifford Prince Ken, whose work is about Black queer identity also. In this series, I play around with mirrors to allude to the notions of reflections. Everyone uses mirrors to take a look at themselves in the mirror, and they to take a look at themselves in the mirror to reflect on their appearances and how to present a look to the world, and also how they look into themselves. And I know gender identity is a performance in here, and in the bigger society, you are allowed to perform a certain way to be accepted in the Black community, while also in the Black community also have to present in a certain way to be accepted in that community. And while in the first images, you can see the person putting on the shoes while standing in the mirror, and also looking into the mirror to kind of reflect and ask themselves the question if they're allowed to wear or perform this identity they're trying to put on. And then the second image, you can see the same subject wearing the heels, reflecting and looking at how they present to the world and to themselves. I had the subject obscure their face with a bandana as a way to hide their identity. But you can see that it's not being successful. It's not successful because they're still visible to us while we're looking at them. And the last image, you can see the subject in motion walking in the pavement with a mirror discreetly present. The mirror here, in this case, symbolizes that they are being watched as they step into society as a Black queer individual. They're not sure if them performing their queer identity, in addition to being Black, puts them more at risk of being targeted. Hence where the title came from, might be my last line, where they're not sure if them stepping outside and being themselves would ultimately put them at risk of being targeted. And you can find more of my work on my website also. Thank you.
I want to thank you all again for joining us tonight and supporting my peers and I in our senior exhibition. I'm Clara Roth, and the work I'm exhibiting is entitled I Can't Quite Remember. I'd like to start by taking you through the journey that led to this piece. My art career at Dickinson has explored many mediums, subjects, and styles. However, photography has been a connecting thread through all 4 years. My first semester, I took a intro to photography and launched forward from there. This year, I began by continuing to work in and explore photography and documented the 2020 presidential election, which I exhibited in our Works in Progress show and which is on my website. As my work continued to evolve, I was drawn to the idea of collage and began digitally manipulating my work. I love the idea of taking 2 photos of separate moments and combining them to make an entirely new space and experience. My election series included a few of these early digital collages. As the spring semester began, my art evolved in yet another new direction as I reflected on thoughts, memory, and neurodiversity. I collected images on my phone and used my camera roll as an abstract representation of what it's like in my brain. These images can be seen in the gallery catalog or exhibition brochure. The final step was moving out of the digital realm. I printed dozens of pictures, spread them across my studio floor, and with a glue stick, scissors, and X-Acto knife, I began to cut and paste. I mined through my photos from the past 4 years of my life. I created new experiences from old memories. I responded to absence and presence, negative space, color, perspective, and shape. I searched through my digital archives and revisited places, projects, and experiences. From wastewater treatment plants along the Letort to the Rwanda mosaic, research on Icelandic lakes, and family vacations to the beach, Chicago, and Colorado, all are included. Combining my images, I create new environments, blurring the lines between places and experiences, and playing with the memory of place. Thank you.
All right, thank you for coming, everyone. My name is Grayson Bird, and these are my series of oil paintings titled Bittersweet. The series explores how women experience physical and emotional intimacy with both themselves and others. This year, I started out thinking that I was going to work with self-portraits, but I decided I wanted to speak more generally to female experiences. And I still drew on my own experiences with both toxic and healthy relationships, with friends, family, and partners, and the ambiguity that exists in all those relationships. Next slide, please. So many of my paintings, such as this one called Aphasia, explore identity and memory and self-reflection, and how women identify themselves and how other people identify them. Next, please. I use pastel colors because they're comfortable and comforting to me. And I think they also draw people in, but then might depict something that's surprising. These colors also separate these images from reality and place them in a dream world or in someone's memory. Next, please. I don't usually show multiple figures in one painting, but the painting such as the last one called Reflection speaks to female identity. I draw on classical imagery and poses as well, which can be seen in the hands of many of these paintings and the almost religious undertones. Some pieces, such as this one, do address themes such as sexual violence and the conflicting emotions of those experiences. I put shadows and ghostly limbs to suggest the presence of other figures, but we cannot see their identity or their intentions. Next, please. I also was aware of the tradition in the art historical canon of nude female painting, and I wanted to respond to that with my own paintings. I think of the tradition of female portraiture as being a woman who's not aware of the viewer, who is viewed as a sexual object for the viewer's pleasure, usually like through the male gaze. And so the women in my paintings are not looking at the viewer, but they are looking at the other figures that they're interacting with. So they are being assertive in their own way, and the viewer is then put into a position of uncomfortability or voyeurism as they have to decide how they feel about intruding on these vulnerable or private moments. Next, please. And these two paintings also show something that I worked with a lot, which was transparency, to suggest, again, the ideas of memory or the passage of time, or the idea that these other figures might not be physically there with the women, but they exist to these women and are still able to very greatly affect them. These gestures that they're showing to the women could be read as both positive or negative, depending on how the viewer comes to the piece. So, for example, in the piece on the right, the hands beneath the woman's could be seen as giving something or taking away, or the hand on her back could be seen as pushing her or supporting her. These are clearly vulnerable moments, but we never have the full story. And through this, I hope to show the complicated and ambiguous nature of women's identities and relationships. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for joining us here on Zoom. My name is Rodan. For the past few months, I've been working on a series of paintings and drawings that combine a few different methods and mediums. And these works are mainly an exploration for the boundary between what appears to be real and what is not. So something that's less obviously real or logical. I'm very interested in the strange looking things. And there are the things that immediately caught my eyes in a museum. And I like vague interpretations of familiar objects because they always seem to evoke a strange feeling for me. So my works themselves are somewhat bizarre looking, and although you can definitely see a lot of familiar elements here and there. You can also perhaps, see these works as just like an experiment of our subconsciousness or fabrication of the mind. There is a famous linguistic example by Noah Chomsky. It's called "Color screen ideas sleep furiously." This sentence is grammatically correct, but if you really think about it, none of its content makes any sense. There are no such things as color screen ideas, and ideas don't sleep, and they sure don't sleep furiously. So this sentence is, again, grammatically correct, but it's nonsensical. And I like to think my works have a similar logic with this example. I'm very interested in setting up a world that feels both familiar and unfamiliar, a world that feels whimsical, but is still grounded in our familiar perceptions. So many of my works in this way are mimicking this experience where something digresses slightly from reality, something that appears familiar, but on a second thought, it just doesn't feel right. I use lots of different materials, including color pastel, charcoal, oil, color pencil, marker, and watercolor, and different services too. Some of them weren't included in this show, but they're also up on my personal website, and I think everyone has a personal website. So if you guys feel like you can check them out later. So this choices of mixed medium at first were just a backup plan because I was working from home and it's not easy to do oil paintings in an apartment without your parents complaining about the mess and the smell. But as it turned out, I very much appreciated this choice because I get to find ways to combine so many drawing languages, and I think a personal drawing language eventually came through as well. And yeah, again, I want to thank you all for coming, and it's been a strange year for all of us, and it really means a lot that we get to share our works with you.
Awesome. Thank every single one of you for presenting your amazing work. I'm so excited to be fortunate enough to go and see it in the gallery this week. And I hope that those of you who are on campus, part of our Dickinson community, are able to schedule a visit to view their work. Now I'd like to open it up to questions. If you'd like, you can type your question in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, I can call on you and you may unmute yourself to ask your question. While everyone's thinking of their questions, the artists mentioned their artist website. So I want to let everyone know that you can find each of their websites on our Trout from Home blog, and I can put the link in our chat to that for all of you here tonight. So the Senior Studio Speak has its own tab, and you can find all of the artists and more on their work there. So I'll link that in the chat for you all. Hands being raised. Oh, Anthony, there you are.
Hi, gang. Looks fantastic. Can't wait to get into the gallery to check it out. So my question is for all of you, and I don't know that all of you have to answer it, but anyone who wants to can. There's this idea of the happy accident that happens in the art studio. Did any of you guys encounter a happy accident in your work this semester? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can totally speak to that because I tend to have a really rough and sloppy style of work when it comes to creating my own pieces. So pretty much everything is a happy accident, especially in terms of like dirtying up the kitchen, for example. you know, it's very important to like, I guess a lot of artists try and make things seem so specifically sloppy that it just ends up being too honed in. So I would actually try and make accidents happen in order to get that more naturalistic feeling, for lack of better words.
I can also speak to that a bit. I know that working from home, I had sort of limited materials at first. I was able to go to campus to get canvases, but at one point, something new, but you could still kind of see the old painting underneath. And it led to this weird, like, ghostly image underneath my paintings, which I was already thinking about transparency and that ghostly quality. So it kind of pushed me to explore that further, and I would definitely consider doing that in the future too.
If none of the other seniors want to answer that question, Todd, you can unmute.
Hey everyone, sorry, apparently my light is not very good and I look like a sketchy, strange person wearing a hat, but I want to say that it's been amazing to see the progress this year, and you know, I've just been so impressed with the development of everything. I don't have a question, obviously. I just want to say congrats. It's been such a challenging year. I think starting, you know, last year we had students kind of make the transition to remote learning, and that had its own challenges, but the fact that they started in person, you know, meant that they had, you know, kind of come very far by the time that we had to transition. And you all had to start remotely, and I wasn't sure how that was going to work, and it was just really incredible to see this process. And it says so much about all of your resilience and ability to, you know, work through these things and get to this point. I'm really blown away by this exhibition. It's as good as any exhibition that I've seen, and you're all spread out, you know, around the world right now. So it's incredible, and I want to say congrats, and also want to say just a big shout out to Anthony and Rachel, who were able to lead you and make this happen. So yeah, really nice job, everyone, and yeah, big round of applause there.
Awesome. And Duan, I'll ask you to unmute.
Hey, Duan.
Hello, so good to see so many familiar faces here. As you all must know, artists are super informed with the environment around them and adapt to situations that occur to them. So how have you felt or not felt this year with the pandemic? How has it informed your work, changed your work? How have you adapted to it?
I can talk a little bit about that because I mentioned it within my presentation. When last year, I tend to be the person who works with others, so I don't like to see myself in my images because it just makes me uncomfortable. And like when I started, I remember with Anthony when he was our professor last semester, I was having difficulty getting my foot into that process of me being like the subject of it, and I was just having like I had to just get out of the way, just get out of my head and just start creating things, just standing in front of the camera. And then even going back to the happy accident, like the first image that I took that I felt very comfortable with was the obsession piece, which was just like also titled like a fetishism, which is just me standing there experimenting. And the product that came out of it, I liked it because I saw myself not just me in there. I saw myself like artistically see myself in a piece of work where it was just not me standing in front of a camera like normally taking a photo. But yeah.
So hello, Duan. Nice seeing you here. I guess I can also kind of speak to that. For the major challenge for me was, to work from home and not really have the access to, a studio and where I can just kind of make a mess. But I think that really pushes me to, out of my comfort zone and just try to use like totally different methods than I'm used to and totally new different materials. And that, I think that's like a very essential part of, you know, creating things for me, because like you get a lot of, as Anthony mentioned, like happy accidents where like you kind of don't know what will happen, but once you like find a solution, it's kind of surprising and you don't know whether you like it, but then you ended up liking it. So yeah, it's kind of like a bumpy journey, but yeah, like it's just full of surprises, and I think that's just also a very important part of art making, at least for me.
This is Philip Ehrenfeit at the Trout Gallery, and congratulations, everyone. It's an honor to have your exhibition on display here, not just through graduation, but also throughout the entire summer and into the fall. So we're very thrilled and pleased that this worked out this way for us all. I do have one question for you all, and those who wish to respond, please do. Insofar as, of course, the materials and the studio issue is always a challenge. How does it work where some of you did not have the daily input of interaction with your colleagues, more often interaction perhaps with your family members or those where you lived during the pandemic? How is the absence of that day-to-day interaction with colleagues, critiquing each other in an informal way, or at least pointing out things? How did you fill that gap, or did you fill that gap?
I definitely feel that gap, and it's, yeah, like I'm glad you mentioned it, because like it's been hard for me somehow, because it's like I need to kind of jump back and forth between like these two sort of like mindsets. So one is where like I interact with my family and friends here in China, and another is to kind of pull myself like back into this like kind of art making mindset. And it's kind of weird, because like you're not really like immersed in the sort of like environment where you're like usually are while like you're on campus. And yes, so I'm not sure like if I have found the right solution for that. I've been struggling with that a lot. But I guess like that definitely, created a lot of, I guess, like emotions for me, which sort of translated, into the works as well. So maybe like that's a, I guess like good side of it. But yeah, I guess like I hope that answers the question.
I'm going to jump in on that real quick and just say that I know Rachel is basically omnipresent and kind of always on top of you guys. But what I've really appreciated was the Instagram feed, which is constant, right? And it's that equivalent of walking through the senior studios and just tilting your head enough to look in a door and see what's going on. And there's not always a need to comment. There's, maybe you like something, maybe you just records that you've seen it. I've really enjoyed that. And that's helped me feel present in your processes. And I hope you guys continue that after graduation. I think it's a wonderful kind of space.
I have a few questions in the chat. One from Naomi says, I cannot imagine having to work through your final year in isolation. Were you angry? Was it harder than the first 3 years?
I think I can answer that question. Like, since for the last semester, I was just living by myself, like all alone. So I do not have the opportunity to communicate even with my friends or my families at that time. But I think it is a great opportunity for me to just focus what I'm doing right now. You know, like I have saved so much time to just like to focus on my artworks and got feedbacks on the Instagram, like Anthony just said. So yeah, I think that's different. It's not what I expected, but it's went great. So.
I can also speak to that one a little bit. I guess, yeah, COVID definitely threw me through a loop at first, in terms of the way I typically approach photography is just like wandering around with my camera and seeing what kind of catches my eye and documenting that. But because of coronavirus, health concerns, and like other various things, I wasn't able to do that in the same way. And so I guess that's kind of, I went through like a bunch of different, trying to find a bunch of, a way that like making art that worked for me after losing that one. So I guess that's why I ended up going back to photos I had taken in the past. But ultimately, I think it was a good like growing experience, even though it was definitely frustrating at times.
Yeah, I mean, my work is honestly about different ways in which we cope. And I think because of the pandemic, so many of us were forced to cope with like things that we never thought we would necessarily have to cope with. And I know I personally developed coping mechanisms that were incredibly unhealthy, and art was kind of my way to step out of that and say, okay, let's reevaluate what we're doing here, and let's kind of have an outlet for this energy that can produce something that might be good, might not be good, but regardless, it's an outlet. And I'm personally really thankful that I had like access to actually like make stuff and express myself in that way.
Hi. So I actually have a question for Clara. So a specific question, and that is one of the things you didn't talk about, but I wondered about with where you ended up in terms of your process, was the degree to which your environmental studies major and interest factored into where you headed. Because when I sort of watching your trajectory, the final pieces seem to have a lot to do with the sort of push-pull between man-made and natural. And I'm wondering how you see that being articulated. Like, do you see your works as somehow a criticism of the ways in which sort of man impacts the environment, or is there a different kind of thing going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my other major is environmental science, and that has definitely shaped the way I see the world. And I guess photography is the best way that I can like capture how I see the world. So naturally, a lot of my photos incorporate different scenes that kind of reflect that. Like I'm drawn to really industrial structures with like hard lines and shapes, but I also am drawn to natural like landscapes with like free moving lines. So it's not a great way to describe that, but I guess, and then with like putting the photos together, I guess that was kind of a natural contrast for me to make, because looking at like human relationship to environment and like where do humans sit in the environment, like is human and like man-made structures isolated from the nature. So I guess I kind of explore that through my work and through the contrasting urban and natural photos. Sorry, I'm not sure how well that answered your question.
No,
but-
that's great. A lot of what you're saying is what I was sort of interpreting myself, and I was just curious how much it did factor into what your process and what you're thinking.
Do we have any other questions? Would want to raise your hand? Anything else? Well, before we log off, I know that Heather put in the chat as well, if you are a Dickinson student, faculty, or staff member, for the time being, you can make a reservation to see this show on Engaged. Heather linked that for you. And to everyone, our Trout from Home blog is up, and you can click that link to view more about the Trout Gallery and more about each of the seniors and their work. Rachel, do you have any other last thoughts? Anything you want to add?
No, just congratulations, everyone. The show looks really amazing. And if you're on campus, there's catalogs available. And if not, the show will be up. The catalog is online as well. But proud of you guys. Good job.
Thank you all so much for being here. And again, thank you seniors for all of your hard work. And thank you, Rachel, for leading all of them this semester. Hopefully we can see all of you back in the gallery very soon. And also this recording will be on our YouTube channel by Monday as well. So thank you all so much for being here tonight.